Hello and welcome back to the weekly Premier Injuries podcast, where we discuss all things to do with injuries and the Premier League. We're giving insights into player injuries with knowledge on return times and cutting through rumour or misinformation. This will be at the same time every Thursday throughout the season. So if you have any inquiries, you can comment below or tweet any of us. And also, before we get into the big stories and analysis for this week, remember to subscribe to the channel. We've got so much good content here. But Arch, as always, a pleasure to welcome you back. How are you doing today?
I'm pretty good. Just recovering from a bunch of weddings, but otherwise doing pretty well.
We saw you looking like 007 during those weddings. I mean, was it, did it live up to that kind of superstar billing?
We'll say yeah. Yeah, I did.
And Ben, bringing it to the Bond up in the north. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing better than Steve Bruce.
I mean, we had a discussion on our other podcast about Steve Bruce, but maybe you might want to quickly kind of repeat some of those thoughts and feelings that I thought were very good in kind of summarizing how, yes, Steve Bruce hasn't been the most amazing manager, but he's definitely been mistreated by the club.
Do you know what really, really gets my goat is supporters will often talk about, we're not, as long as you're passionate, as long as you've got the heart of the club at the centre of your heart, you are willing to do whatever it takes, and you will be loved regardless of what kind of skill set you have or what areas you may lack in. And for me, Steve Bruce is from the area. He loves Newcastle. He's local. I think he wanted more than anybody to be a success at this club. He came in on the back of Rafa Benitez's departure, and from day one, he's been fighting fires. Not nobody, but a lot of people up here, and I think it's a disgrace, by the way. They've wanted him to fail. These narrow-minded people who will just target managers. Some of the things that he's had to deal with away from the pitch, death threats to his family, and everything else that's tied in with social media. I think it's, like I say, it's an absolute disgrace. And I've spoke to people internally, and we've seen the comments from Alan Saint-Maxim today. He's come out and he's thanked his manager. I mean, people even having to go at Saint-Maxim, by the way, here for thanking his manager. I mean, you know what? That just sums the mentality of some of the arseholes that are in the world these days with regards to trolls and social media. That they didn't know dregs of the earth, actually. Steve Bruce was very, very liked, particularly up until maybe the last part of last season, where there were some kind of discussions, shall we say, internally about, but that was to be expected. Things weren't going well. Results off the pitch when players are unhappy when they're not playing. But Saint-Maxim hit the nail right on the head. He was well respected, and there was nobody, within that club really had a bad word to say against him as a person. Tactically, yeah, there were maybe areas of his management style that were lacking. But look, he was willing to come into the club, and he produced results and performances that far exceeded anybody's expectations. They had us pegged to go down from day one. He didn't, and I'd like to wish him all the best. And if this is his last club, well, do you know what? I hope it isn't, because I wouldn't want this experience to sour all of those years. I mean, 1,000 games, I wish it had have ended on a better note against Tottenham. And do I think he was the right man for the jobs long term? No. But did he deserve to be treated like this? Absolutely not. Hounded out the club, by the supporters. Let's make no bones about it. A certain section of that fans, and had it not been for the pandemic and the shutdown and not having the crowds there, he would have been put through a hell of a lot more than he already had. So, look, wish him all the best. It is what it is. That's football. That's nature of the beast that we're dealing with these days.
I guess, Raj, do you have anything to add to that situation?
No, I think, to Ben's point, I think to me, it's embarrassing, right? To see that type of behavior, especially for someone who, like he said, we talk so much about someone who wants to give it their all for their club. Now you have someone like that and you still treat them in such a manner. It just goes to show you, man, fans are always just going to be very selective in terms of how they treat you. If you're not getting results, it's this. If you are, it's that. You pick and choose all the time. You can't win either way. And so I just think, like long-term was the solution, but it shouldn't have even, come down to this point in the way that he was treated. To me, it is quite embarrassing, but frankly, it's also a reflection of some of the toxic culture that we see these days. Everyone's a big man when they're behind a screen, right? There's that famous quote from like FDR about the man in the arena. It's always easy to sit in the crowd and say things unless you're actually in the arena. You're the one actually going through all these things. And so there's always that disconnect between fans and actually understanding how much hard work goes into that these coaches put in, that these players put in on a daily basis.
No, it's very well put, Raj, and Ben as well, kind of summarizing. Bruce as the man does not deserve that. And as a manager, he doesn't deserve it. He was a great person for the club. Many people probably wouldn't have gone to Newcastle at the time, knowing the situation with Mike Ashley and everything. He was brave to take it on. And so, yes, like you said, Ben, tactically, maybe he wasn't always brilliant, but he was a good person to kind of do that. Let's move on to discussion points, though. And, we've started off with something very sad to do with Newcastle, and we're continuing on difficult discussion points, because at the weekend, we almost saw somebody lose their life in terms of cardiac arrest. Thankfully, once again, we've seen at a football stadium, because the right kind of equipment was there, the right kind of personnel, somebody went into cardiac arrest. They were seen in time. They were given CPR. They were given that defib, and there's a happy story to it. I don't know who wants to kind of open out on this one, because, time, defibrillators, all this kind of stuff is so important. I guess, Raj, looking at what happened at the weekend, is it always a success story like that, or was it because all the right ingredients were there for the moment?
No, it's absolutely about the right ingredients, right? Recognizing that something's happened and then getting the person, like you said, the defib that they needed to be able to kind of re-jump the heart as quickly as you can. And so it's a testament. I think either if someone pointed it out first and then Regulon saw it on the pitch and then pointed it out to the lead official as well, right? So I think it was just a pretty impressive sequence of events.
And Ben, we had a fantastic interview with Saadi Raza. I mean, do you kind of want to reiterate some of the points that he had about what is, a fairly under-talked issue that affects a lot of young sports people?
It can do, yeah. And look, we've been banging this drum for quite a while now, and I don't see any harm in revisiting this, because of such is the importance and such is, those moments when somebody does go into cardiac arrest. It is vital. We're talking about major organs here, a lack of oxygen, a lack of blood. And as every moment ticks by, those cells are damaged within those major organs. And Saudi spoke about what he referred to as bystander CPR. If you see somebody who does go into cardiac arrest, it's always better to jump on it and start administering CPR as opposed to picking up the phone and ringing an ambulance. Even those short delays in, that administering that can have a dramatic effect. We mentioned with Alan George Smith was the guy who actually was rushed to hospital on Sunday. Well, Newcastle have released an update. He's actually fine. He's still in hospital. He's updated. But, if you were going to have a cardiac arrest anywhere, whether it be a hospital, probably next best place is somewhere like St. James's Park, because, they were able to identify the problem, administer CPR, and then defib, Alan, literally within a case of minutes. And that then, ensures that it gives that person every opportunity to make, hopefully, what we'll see as a long-term recovery and some kind of return to to normality.
Raj, can I ask you quickly then, if somebody is in that sort of circumstances that you think that they require CPR, what is a really quick and easy guide that you can give to it in terms of compressions? How many should you give, breaths, and whatnot?
Yeah, I don't even want to give it, because it depends on the age. There's so many specifics to it. I would say, to anyone listening, if you can, take the CPR course. It's 2 to 3 hours, and you could save someone's life, right? Because some of it depends on technique, some of it depends on where you're doing the compression. So I can't really generalize it in that regard. But like I said, it's a 2 to 3 hour course to become CPR certified, and you could literally save, someone's life. And we know, like with heart cells, cardiac cells never come back; they never regrow. So once they're gone, they're gone. So it's obviously a very, very important organ, and that influences the rest of your vital organs as well.
And we'll put links in the description to that as well, because it is such an important issue. And very good news there, like you said there, Ben, that he seems to be on the mend and on a positive trend towards full fitness, or as much fitness as he can get after that. Let's move, though, to an issue in terms of Everton FC. Abdoulaye Doucoure has come out this week, Ben, with a foot injury. Can you explain what the injury is and the possible time out?
Yeah, so this was a problem that was picked up during the West Ham game. There wasn't sort of evident from the game itself. I think he played 90 minutes. I missed the last 10. So unless something cropped up there, I certainly wasn't aware of any issue. But Everton released a statement on Tuesday confirming a setback. They didn't give any specifics with regards to the actual definitive diagnosis of the injury itself or any expected timeline. They referred to a stress related fracture of the foot, which did not require surgical intervention. Now, we know that Doucoure actually suffered a similar problem towards the back end of last season. That resulted in around 66 days on the sidelines. Now, if that was the case this time around, then, the expectation is that we wouldn't see Doucoure back in an Everton shirt until around maybe that festive programme, potentially Boxing Day. But again, as with any long-term injury, the road to full recovery is rarely straight, and it's rocky. There are twists and turns, and as we'll probably touch upon later on the podcast, we have an update on Dominic Calvert Lewin, which goes in to emphasize that point with regards to players' recovery during rehab.
And just quickly before I throw to Raj, Ben, what is the kind of risk of re-injury with this type of foot injury?
Yeah, so we don't know if it was impact. We don't know if it's been or if it's an overuse problem, and that could be linked to load. So ordinarily, if there's a fracture of the foot, maybe the metatarsal, then they may require a surgical intervention depending on the extent. It may need to be pinned or screwed. Certainly that's not the case in this instance. So it will be a case of managing that issue. They will be restricting his load, maybe anti-gravity, a lot of work in the pool initially, try and maintain some kind of base level of fitness, and then gradually as that bone begins to heal. Raj will probably fill in with a more of a medical aspect of himself, but the blood flow in and around this area, I'm understanding, Raj, that it isn't necessarily great, and that can sometimes inhibit that recovery, which is why surgical intervention is sometimes recommended.
Yeah, so typically if it's on the fifth metatarsal, like the outer one, we call it a Jones fracture. That typically has probably a watershed area. It has limited blood supply and also has a bunch of other anatomical attachments, which limits its ability to heal well. So they'll put a pin in it. I actually have a pin in my left foot with the Jones fracture, so I know of it quite well. In this case, it sounded like this is either a stress response, or I think that's what they call it, something like that, which is a precursor to a stress fracture. And so it may or may not be. Typically, that's a load issue, but with his previous injury history, it's hard to say. It might be a knock or not. So I don't know if it's going to be as long of a delay as he had last season, where he had an overt fracture. But the key is you have, like, I think that the treatment will be very similar to what you said: reduce the load, see how he's responding, and then, of course, progress based on, as we often talk about, right, the functional progressions that we now see that are quite common. And so I think the fact that they found it early is a good indicator for him to return quicker. But these can evolve. Foot injuries in general can evolve, so quickly, as we've seen it with so many cases, whether it's Phil Foden, whether it's Ferran Torres, et cetera, et cetera.
So, Raj, I've got a question in terms of the Doucoure one, maybe comparing it to the aforementioned Calvert Lewin one. But Calvert Lewin, if I'm correct, had a fracture as well, but he was able to continue. So what is the difference in the type of injuries? Is it how bad it was, or is it because of the placement in the area of the foot?
Yeah, it's more placement. From my understanding with Calvert Lewin, it was more in the big toe. Yeah. Like farther along towards the distal end. Ben, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And so there's really no, the treatment for that, honestly, though, is buddy tape it and then it'll heal. There's not much you can do for that. Whereas if it's lower down along those metatarsals, that's going to be more of a more difficult area to heal, and you have to reduce the stress on it and allow it to heal first.
So an interesting insight there into two types of injuries that people might kind of associate together but have very different outcomes. Let's talk about this setback then, Ben. What's the kind of latest to come out of Everton? Because a lot of people were hoping this weekend for Calvert Lewin and Richarlison to be back. And tactically, just before your analysis, Ben, I found this week especially pronounced that Everton almost seemed to have only a plan A. They didn't have a plan B. Against West Ham, they really played quite well off the park. Everton and West Ham are both kind of teams that sit back, wait for the counter-attack and go with that. And then you look at the data of the game, the fact that like Townsend had the most crosses this game week of any player. But who was he crossing to? He didn't have Richarlison. He didn't have DCL, those type of players that, work off one another, but also fantastic in the air. And so I feel like this is a big blow to the team. Just kind of explain with DCL then.
Yeah, this was a strange one, actually. We seen DCL training away from the main group down at Finch Farm ahead of game week 7. And there was even some talk from corners of the media that DCL could return along with Richarlison then. And I think we've mentioned it before, that was never really the case. But we had this 2-week block of the international break, and we expected both players to be there or thereabouts. Rafa Benitez update actually confirmed the likes of Seamus Coleman and Lucas Digne, were all fine. But the Richarlison, while he said was nearing return and he was progressing really well, he wasn't able to give any kind of definitive timeline on DCL. So I think alarm bells were ringing at that point, and that, there may even be some suggestion that this setback happened a few days ago and not just recently, as the update suggests with Everton. We know that he had been managing that broken toe, but the biggest problem is the setback with this quadriceps strain. So that's the problem that's kept him on the sidelines. Now, the official update as it goes, it will set him back in another few weeks. Now, what we're looking at now, we've got another international break coming up. So we could be looking at very, very best mid to late November. And of course, DCL won't have any competitive minutes in his legs. I think last appearance was his game against Brighton, maybe back end of August. So we're talking, a good 3 month there on the sideline. So, we may not be seeing the best of Calvert Lewin maybe until we're getting towards that festive program, in and around the Boxing Day, New Year, because he will need to be managed as well, his reintegration into the team.
And the thing that I wanted to ask you, Ben, is why is he out? Like, I just asked Raj about how he was able to continue with this injury. What has kind of happened subsequently that has meant that he not only can not play on it, but he's actually going to be out for, as you said there, about 3 months?
Yeah, so what we don't really know the specifics behind it and how that happened and the mechanism of injury. But a lot of people always question, how can you suffer a setback on the training pitch and during rehab? These things happen. They're part and parcel of the game. And sometimes there's just no explanation. We talk about how players may hit baseline testing figures and even surpass them for some reason. And the second they step out on the pitch, within minutes they suffer a setback or recurrence. Regardless of how good your training, your rehab is, you can't quite mimic that competitive environment in the body. You need to be building up tolerances for the player. You need to be pushing those thresholds to ensure that, when they do return, they can tolerate the game. So it's, and it could be that maybe, Calvert Lewin was being ready for that next phase of recovery. We spoke to Phil Haywood and about the strategies that Wolves implemented at the time, and that was fairly groundbreaking when that was introduced, where what would ordinarily happen, you would have a process of returning a player to full training, to normal training, and they would transition from that then into the first team. But what they've done at Wolves, they were coming to that final phase of rehab. And instead of ticking the rehab box and then saying, right, now you go and train with the first team, they would do that final phase actually in the first team. So they would still be doing that final phase of recovery, even though they were taking part in full training. And they found that way that they were minimizing recurrence and re-injury rates. They were also quickening return to players, and players were transitioning from there into the first team environment. It was a lot smoother and a lot greater, and they had a lot of success with that. So we're trying to read between the lines here and maybe guess what's happening. But ultimately, it could be just one of those things. It's an injury that, the kicking mechanism, that quadriceps, it's something that's going to be highly used and easily overloaded. And look, one of those things, very, very disappointing for Everton and Dominic Calvert Lewin.
Raj, is one of the most difficult things now for Calvert Lewin that period of getting back to full fitness during the hectic Christmas calendar. They talk about that early pre-season period as being so essential for the baseline of fitness. Has that, the 3 month time that he will have out basically removed that baseline fitness? So he's going to have to get fit and be able to be competitive very quickly in a very hectic schedule.
Yeah, extremely. I mean, it's very difficult to get ready in that type of atmosphere. And then also, as what Ben talked about, you can't replicate in match fitness when you're not playing in games. That's why a lot of times you'll see players, if they do get re-injured, it's in that first handful of games. But once they're able to play a string of games, their body has now acclimated to the rigors of on-pitch demands. And there's just no way, to replicate that. Even if you do come back early, like we saw with Harry Maguire, I think he had like 2 days of training. He came back, he was completely off the pace, right? And so that's the other side of the coin. Even if you don't get re-injured, right, you might just be completely off the pace and hurt your team when you're on the pitch. And so that's the other, that transition is what I found. I think what a lot of providers or physios or strength conditioning coaches, I do a little bit of both, find that transition is by far the hardest, and it's filled with a lot of gray area. So that Wolves approach of where you're integrating and having that collaborative environment rather than it being more siloed, certainly makes sense. And I think you see a lot more clubs moving towards that integrative approach between all these disciplines.
Let's move it.
Yeah.
Oh.
So all I was going to add, and let's not forget, I mean, there is a lot of research out there that you took, because you touched upon the pre-season and that block of training program forming the cornerstone. Let's not forget Dominic Calvert Lewin was actually away with England at the Euros. And we talk about how players who aren't necessarily involved in those competitive games almost becoming deconditioned, over the duration of that tournament. He returned, I understand, within maybe, 7 to 10 days. He was back at finished form, post-Euros. Then he suffered a broken toe, which then had a knock-on effect to him being able to undertake. He had a heavily disrupted preseason, and then when he was back, he couldn't even take part in that. And the research will say, the more hours you put on the training pitches, the better your body can cope with the demands of the game as the season goes on. And with regards to a pre-season, Dominic Calvert Lewin has very little to none, and maybe that's this setback and him missing these games maybe shouldn't come as any great surprise.
Let's move it on to the final discussion point of this podcast. The international break seems to still be hanging over us because there's been so much talk this weekend about who has returned, who hasn't. I don't know if we're going to put up on screen, Ben, some of the comments that people sent in about certain players, about their attitude towards the game, their commitment and things like that. But there's basically the discussion. People saw that Douglas Luiz was starting and playing for Aston Villa, and then people questioned, well, why isn't Rafinha doing it? Why isn't Alisson Becker? Why wasn't Fabinho? And a lot of people saying, are they lazy? Are they this? Are they that? Oh, they're flying back on a 5-star plane and things like that. But yeah, why did some play, Ben? Why was some altogether omitted? Why was some tinkered on the bench? I think it's a really fascinating talking point about actually how, yes, you might be sleeping on some 5-star luxury jet, but that's not always enough to protect you from fatigue.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just bringing up the comments there now because I was quite surprised when I posted some post-match comments from Marcelo Bielsa, which I just thought really were fairly evident and self-explanatory and didn't really need any context whatsoever. He touched upon the absence of Rafinha and how the Brazilian had been involved for his country. There was a 36-hour turnaround. He arrived back at the club. I think he was assessed on the Saturday morning, and the decision was made not to involve him in the match day squad. The right decision, in my opinion. Although, yeah, look, you touched upon Douglas Luiz and Martinez, and Raj will always talk about the risk and reward. We also talk about, a player status within a squad, and also those managers, those players and managers who are risk averse and those, and so it caused a little bit of trouble. And I was really, really surprised at some of the comments. And I mean, I put these to you, Raj, just to see how your thoughts on it. I mean, we have, and I will name and shame. We had one from from Phil Hurst, and he said he's a professional. He doesn't need to rest after one game, not to mention that he will be in first class and asleep for most of the journey, resting. We had a one from, and Scott Larson was particularly peeved, and I think the result obviously against Southampton didn't help. And by the way, before I go to the next one, Southampton actually outran Leeds for the first time any team hasn't since they got promoted to the Premier League. We had Scott Larson. Sorry, but that's not an excuse from Marcelo Bielsa. We're playing a direct rival, a top. It was a must-win game, and it's unacceptable in my opinion. Yeah, such a stupid take. somebody, yeah. So FPL Treadstone on your, health is a priority. We need to look after our players. And of course, what you're trying and championing is help people understand, do you take a chance for one game? Or, do you be a little bit more cautious in your approach and think, right, well, actually, we'll miss this one, but potentially, we've got him for the next 5 or 6, which you may not have, if he was to suffer a setback. We know Rafinha's been carrying muscular problems and injuries for the last few game weeks. So, ultimately, it was the right decision. Although, I think these comments, it's all about, it's the here and now, and it's that short-termism without an understanding of the bigger picture and, the decisions that happen within that football environment.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because if Rafinha plays and he gets hurt, then all these fans will be saying, how dare you play him? He only had 36 hours of rest. And then it would be the complete opposite argument, right? And that's the funniest thing. I mean, the reality is, like you said, he's been carrying muscular injuries. He played 36 hours prior. He was still traveling, regardless of being first class. We know there's associated fatigue along with that, associated dehydration potentially, associated inflammatory markers potentially, right? And so there's all these variables and metrics associated with that. And also, his style of play is such, it's very start, stop, quick burst. And so that can also potentially lead to having, more muscular injuries, right? So it's all these factors you have to consider and the club is considering. And so, do you play him for one game versus a rival and then, like you said, and then have him potentially miss 5 or 6? You'd rather sacrifice him for 3 points and have him be available to earn, numerous more down the line. So, you got to see the forest for the trees, but that's obviously not a strong suit for many people.
Right. So just from just something that cropped up in my mind, is this something that's fairly prevalent in North American sports? I'm thinking maybe the NBA, where you may have players playing games in quick succession, but are maybe required to fly across country, different time zones, different climates. Do you find that is the heavy rotation in and around like the NBA because of that, or have these, coaches and players learned, ways of coping mechanisms or ways to strategize to maybe combat or limit, injury incidents?
Yeah, I think you'll see. I mean, a big term that got popularized in the NBA is, quote, load management. So it's essentially doing the same thing. It's how do you reduce someone's minutes? How do you reduce their usage during a game to take away some of those high load variables? I think the biggest difference with the NBA, you don't have international breaks during the season. You don't have guys flying across the world, right? And being associated with a completely different medical staff or training staff. You have guys working with the same training and medical staff the entire time. So we've seen, for example, Jurgen Klopp talked about how, Curtis Jones was handled by the England staff, right? So you have some of these disconnects that come into play there, whereas in the NBA or NFL, whatever it is, you have the same guys handling them throughout their entire season, because that handing off of care always comes with some discrepancy. You can't always tell them what exactly has been going on.
I mean, one final question before we wrap up then is to both you, Ben, and to you, Raj, is do you feel almost a little bit of anger towards FIFA at the moment because they've sneakily put in extra games during these international periods as well? They were going on in the summer about a need for players to rest and player protection, and that's the priority. And maybe the problem with a lot of these injuries is they're sneakily introducing 3 games in instead of the usual 2 during these international breaks. I mean, it's inexplicable, but adding to that is how in close proximity these were. I mean, is this kind of almost horrifying to you, Ben?
I mean, look, there's not just the players here, but it's also you're doing the fans a disservice who are, we're paying to watch a game and you're getting maybe a substandard service. Players are not able to perform at optimum levels, first and foremost, with that such a quick turnaround in time. Look, and it's a difficult one. I know we've heard Thibaut Courtois come out post Nations League final or third place playoff about how that game had been sort of shoehorned in with no thought or consideration for players' loads and travelling. I'm not saying, look, I think load management is something which is high on the agenda, but you talk to other players as well, and what would you rather be doing? Would you rather be playing or would you rather be training? And look, money is an issue as well. Maybe it's not on the international stage, but certainly domestically. If you, again, I spoke to players who just get on with it. That, that's my job. That's what I'm doing. I'm paid to play football. In the grand scheme of things, right? You're a footballer and you play 2 games within 48 hours. I mean, if I had a job where I worked for 90 minutes or, twice in 48 hours, I'd be thinking, that's not bad. I mean, you've got players down the lower leagues who are still in full-time work, who are, going out on the pitch and still playing, high intensity level games of football. So there's no easy answer to this one. FIFA, UEFA, it's all about the money. They play a lip service to, pretending to maybe make these considerations in and around the players and managing those players' health and well-being. But look, we've seen with Qatar, and I rest my case on the, next year's World Cup, how it's shoehorned in the middle of a domestic campaign. It's moved away from the summer to the winter. I understand that the Premier League will have an additional 1 week added at the beginning of the season. So we'll start in early August, and we'll have 1 week added to the end of the season, which will bring about the end of May. And in the period of that, we will have a 6-week block for players who will be involved in the World Cup. Now, how does that work? Are we going to have teams that are playing the majority, of 2 to 3 games every single week? It just, it beggars belief. So, yeah.
Raj, any final comments on that then?
No, I think you pretty much covered it. I mean, the evidence now is pretty clear what FIFA, UEFA care about, right? It's money. We don't know how they've handled concussion incidents, and we see it every World Cup, right? Just this clearly players who are completely befuddled, they don't know where they are allowed to play on. I mean, FIFA wanting to add a World Cup every 2 years, it pretty much sums up everything to me. So, I mean, it's so transparent. We know why Qatar got the World Cup in the first place. So, I mean, it's so transparent where it doesn't even, you don't even need to comment on it.
I think we'll keep the two World Cups every year. A World Cup.
Will be 2 every year.
My God. FIFA would love you, man.
Yeah, I've just given them a bad idea. Don't listen to that FIFA 2 World Cups a year idea. We'll probably keep the World Cup every 2 years, maybe for next week as a discussion point, because I think it's a interesting one, but also equally horrifying. But for now, I'm going to wish everybody, thank you for tuning in. Do subscribe to the channel. Do leave a like, comment below if you've enjoyed the content, ask questions away, but also do make sure to check out Raj over at Free CB Performance. Great videos, great Twitter, fantastic site, so much info. And you've got a Patreon now as well, Raj. Do you want to quickly kind of explain what people can sign up for there?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, all my normal stuff is always going to be available to the public, but if you want bonus articles, videos, podcasts, or you just want to support the work, feel free to head over on, to Patreon 3CB Performance and take a look at, what the offerings are. Yeah,
there's so much good content, the free stuff and the paid stuff as well. But for now, we're going to say goodbye. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll be back again next week, same time, talking all good things in terms of Premier League injuries.